Steps into it. Pass is caught. Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable!
Pass is intercepted at the goal line by Malcolm Butler. Unreal. Touchdown! Kansas City! Damian Williams runs to immortality and will be remembered forever in the Chiefs' kingdom.
Everybody, and welcome in again to another Sunday evening here on KC Radio 97.7 FM for some Talkin American footy with me, Brent Sternberg, on this first Sunday night of the new year 2021 and the final Sunday night of the 2020 NFL regular season. Week 17 will kick off tomorrow and it will bring to a close one of the most hectic NFL seasons really in living memory, and it's shaping up to be an absolute climactic finish in the NFL. With in the AFC, there will be 5 teams fighting for 4 playoff spots, and in the NFC, we will have 3 teams fighting for 2. So there's a lot that will come down to the wire. In the next couple of segments, I'm going to go through those games, and I'm going to try and wrap my head and help you guys wrap your heads as well around all the playoff implications that lay in store with the 16 games, the full slate of games that will occur tomorrow. But before we do that, as we normally do in the first segment, we're going to go back and preview the prior week, in this instance, week 16, which kicked off all the way back on Boxing Day last Saturday. It was a matchup in New Orleans between the Saints and the Vikings, with the Saints winning that one 52-33. Alvin Kamara, the big story out of that one, an NFL record 6 rushing touchdowns, which matched Hall of Famer Ernie Nevers of the Chicago Cardinals back in 1929. The Saints clinched their 4th straight NFC South Division title, and that eliminated the Minnesota Vikings. The following day, we had a triple header. It was the Bucs in the first game. Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers far too strong for Detroit. 47-7 winners. Tampa Bay clinched with that one their first playoff appearance since 2007. Tom Brady was enormous in the first half. He threw 4 touchdowns and 348 yards in the first half alone. While Detroit, they lost Matt Stafford to an ankle injury early in the first quarter. Looks like he'll be okay tomorrow, Matt Stafford, in what could be his final game in the Motor City for the Detroit Lions. The middle game on Saturday, or Sunday our time, was the Niners in an upset win over Arizona. They could have sealed a playoff spot last week, Arizona, with a win and a couple of other things going their way, but they didn't, and instead will have to win and beat the LA Rams tomorrow and hope for Chicago to lose as well. I'll get into that a little while later. Jeff Wilson for the Niners had a career-high 204 scrimmage yards, 183 rushing, and the nightcap was the Dolphins escaping in an absolute thriller over the Raiders, 26-25, with that unbelievable last play from Ryan Fitzpatrick while having his face mask pulled. That win for the Dolphins eliminated the Las Vegas Raiders in heartbreaking style, who played for the field goal late in that one and lived to regret that decision. It was Jason Sanders kicking a field goal with 1 second remaining to win that game for the Dolphins. And then the Sunday games, the Chargers beat the Denver Broncos in a close one, 19-16. Justin Herbert broke the rookie record for passing touchdowns with 28. Michael Badgley, the Chargers kicker, who's had a forgettable season and who was coming off a forgettable game against the Raiders the week before, in which he missed 2 late field goals, including the one that would have forced overtime against Denver. He was 4 of 4, including a game winner in the final minute. Meanwhile, the Broncos kicker, Brandon McManus, doinked 2 field goals off the same upright on back-to-back tries in a game that the Broncos ended up losing by 3 points. So disappointing loss there for the Broncos. The Chargers get their 6th win of the season and move to 6-9. The New York Jets had another win, a massive win, a big upset over the Browns, who are in playoff contention. Still, they could have clinched a playoff spot with a win here, but they went down to the Jets 23-16. The Jets go from 0-13 to 2-13. Sam Darnold completed 50% of his passes for 175 yards and 2 touchdowns. and the Jets combined to rush for 131 yards. The Browns lost their top 4 receivers in this one due to close contacts from a positive COVID-19 test, and their flight out to Newark was delayed for over 4 hours due to the late arriving positive COVID-19 testing and contact tracing that followed. So a pretty forgettable and regrettable Sunday for the Cleveland Browns, who now need to beat the Steelers tomorrow to get in. No such worries for the Baltimore Ravens. They beat the New York Giants 27-13. Lamar Jackson, J.K. Dobbins, and Gus Edwards, they each surpassed 75 or more yards rushing in this win over the Giants. Baltimore, J.K. Dobbins, the rookie, rushed for a touchdown in his 5th straight game, which is a rookie record. Daniel Jones for the Giants, he was sacked 6 times and finished 24 of 41 for 252 yards and a touchdown. Baltimore, their win combined with losses by the Browns and the Colts puts them in control of its playoff destiny. They need to win tomorrow. They play Cincinnati, so you'd think that they're on track for another playoff berth. Speaking of Cincinnati, they beat Houston last week in a surprising win, but a good win, 37-31. It's the first time in more than 2 years that they've won a road game. This win, of course, came on the road in Houston. Cincinnati, 2 straight wins as well for the first time since week 4 and 5 in 2018. Brandon Allen, the starting quarterback for the Bengals, carved up Houston for 371 yards and had a passer rating of 126.5. J.J. Watts in the presser after the game had a passionate rant post-game about how guys, if they're not prepared to play and win, then they shouldn't be here. Pretty passionate, J.J. Watt after that game, and I wonder if he's playing out the final games in Houston. That's an interesting side note to watch as the offseason rolls around. Chicago had a comfortable win over Jacksonville, 41-17. 30 or more points in 4 straight games for the Bears for the first time since 1965. And Mitch Trubisky, 24 of 35 for 265 yards and 2 touchdowns, with 1 interception and a rushing touchdown as well. Playing really well down the stretch. Mitch Trubisky, Allen Robinson, he caught 10 passes for 103 yards. Chicago, they leapfrog with this win. They leapfrog Arizona into the number 7 seed in the NFC with Sunday's victory. Jacksonville, their loss coupled with the Jets' win over the Browns clinches the number 1 overall draft pick. So they will pick first in the draft in April in only, 3 months' time? Or 4 months' time? 3 months' time. So a good win there for the Bears, and in one way, I suppose, a good win, a good loss for Jacksonville. Kansas City, they were in a close one over the Falcons. They eked out a close win, 17-14 on the road. Young Ho Koo, 39-yard field goal attempt, was wide right in the final seconds. That miss snapped Koo's streak of 27 straight field goals made. So that cost them a chance to send that game to overtime. Atlanta, they held the Chiefs under 20 points for the first time all season in a pretty good defensive performance, but the win for the Chiefs clinches the number 1 seed in the AFC. So we'll see the Chiefs play tomorrow against the Chargers, and then they'll have the week off the week after. Pittsburgh, they got back on the winners list with a furious second half performance against Indy. They won 28-24. They clinch their first AFC North title since 2017 with a dazzling comeback after being down 24-7. Steelers rushed for 20 yards. That's their second lowest total in a win in team history. While the Colts, they could have taken control of the AFC South on Sunday with a win, and instead they blew a 17-point lead to the Steelers and now find themselves on the outside looking in tomorrow. They need to beat Jacksonville and hope that some other results go their way, which I'll break down after the break. But continuing with the games in Week 16, Carolina beat Washington 20-13. The football team, they only needed a win to clinch the NFC East, but you wouldn't have known it by the way that they played. They played pretty awful. Dwayne Haskins played in this one before he was cut the next day. Dwayne Haskins cut during the week. Taylor Heineke, who come in to replace him, he injected some life into the Washington offense. He went 12 for 9 for 137 yards, throwing a touchdown as well. Carolina, who won in this one, that was their 200th win in franchise history. So well done, Carolina. Seattle, they beat the LA Rams. It was a really good win for the Seahawks, who hadn't beaten the Rams in a little while. They clinched with that win their first NFC West title since 2017. And 16, Seattle, the defense has come alive over the past month, smothering the Rams, and that marked the fifth straight game that Pete Carroll's defense has allowed fewer than 20 points. So the maligned defense that I have dug the boots into a couple of times on this show, they are starting to play some really good football, which is great for them. They were not going to win the Super Bowl or come close with a defense that was as porous as they were through the first 10 weeks, but they're starting to come alive. Jared Goff, he had his thumb popped back into place, last week and played poorly, finishing 24 of 43 for 234 yards, 5.4 yards per attempt with an interception. He's not going to play tomorrow for the Rams, who need to win to assure their place in the playoffs, so they went down to the Seahawks last week. Dallas put up 37 points on the Eagles last week. 37-17 was the final in that one. The most combined total net yards in this rivalry between the Cowboys and the Eagles in their history. A total of 999 net yards. Andy Dalton, 22 of 30 for 377 yards, 3 touchdowns and 1 interception. Dalton found Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup for a combined 10 times for a combined 242 yards and 2 touchdowns. Philly, meanwhile, they had plenty of chances to get back into this game, but 12 penalties and 3 turnovers conspired against them. So they have been eliminated. So the other 3 teams in the NFC East are still alive going into tomorrow's final Sunday of the season. Not Philly, though. They have been eliminated. Sunday night football in the snow last week. Green Bay, big winners over Tennessee. Shots fired by the Packers, 40-14. Winners, another strong performance from the Packers, this time at home in the snow, like I said, on prime time. Devontae Adams is the best wide receiver in the game right now. 11 receptions, 142 yards and 3 touchdowns. Adams become the 3rd player in NFL history to have at least 100 receptions and 12 touchdown catches in a season. Remarkable when you factor in the fact that he had 2 weeks where he didn't play due to a hamstring injury. Green Bay, they are now 1 step closer to securing the number 1 seed in the NFC, but they too have to win tomorrow to make a certainty of that. Tennessee, meanwhile, a tough night in tough conditions. They accounted for just 260 yards on offense, so a regrettable night. And then on Monday night, the Bills, they had a bit of fun in New England. They beat the Patriots 38-9. Bills, Monday night was really a payback for 20 years of misery the Patriots have heaped on the Bills and the other teams in the division as well for the last 20 years. Josh Allen, he broke Jim Kelly's single-season passing touchdown record as well with 34. Stephon Diggs won a lot of people their fantasy leagues as well, including mine. He had 9 catches, 145 yards, and 3 touchdowns. New England, an embarrassing defeat that clinched their first losing season since 2000, so that put a cap on week 16. The biggest winner for me last week was Pittsburgh. They needed that win, and that has allowed them now to clinch the division, and it's afforded them the luxury of being able to rest a few guys tomorrow as well, which they have, including quarterback Big Ben Roethlisberger. The biggest loser come in the same division, and that was Cleveland, who lost to the Jets in a game where they threw the ball a bunch, even though they had pretty much all of their wide receivers out. Baker Mayfield did not play well at all. And now they risk losing to the Steelers tomorrow, and they will miss out on the playoffs. And if they do, they will wonder what could have been if they had have beaten the Jets, who up until that point had only won 1 game on the season. So they were the biggest losers for me. Cleveland, who now have to win tomorrow in week 17, which I will get to now after we return after our first ad break, which we're going to take. And when we come back, like I say, we'll have a look at week 16 and all the playoff implications when we return. I'm talking American footy with me, Brent Sternberg. You're listening to KC Radio 97.7 FM. Back soon. Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Talkin' American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg, on KC Radio 97.7 FM on this Sunday evening, where before the break, we went through and reviewed all of the results in Week 16 last week in the NFL, which has set up a massive final week, Week 17, tomorrow in the NFL, where we still have in total 7 playoff spots available across the 2 conferences, 4 in the AFC, where 5 teams are fighting for those 4 spots, and 3 in the NFC, 2 in the NFC, where we have 3 teams fighting for those 2 spots. I'm not going to muck around because there's a little bit to get to, breaking down what needs to happen for some teams, and teams that need to win and get in, and teams that need help. So I'm going to get straight to this. We're going to have a look at the early games tomorrow, which will begin at 5 a.m. tomorrow morning, beginning with the first game that I have on tap here. Anyway, the Atlanta Falcons, the 4-11 Atlanta Falcons at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are 10-5 and coming off a big win against the Detroit Lions, where Tom Brady was in magnificent form, particularly in the first half. The Bucs, they're in a really good position going into tomorrow. If they beat Atlanta for the second time in 3 weeks, they will clinch the number 5 seed, and they will verse the winner of the NFC East. That will be a road game, of course, but you would expect them to beat any of the 3 teams that are still in contention to win the NFC East. However, a Bucs loss coupled with an LA Rams victory over Arizona later in the day means that the Bucs will finish with the 6th seed. The Rams will leapfrog them. Both teams will be tied at 10-6, but the Rams, who beat the Bucs earlier this season, will go above them. The Bucs will finish with seed number 6, and they will play, obviously, the team whoever finishes with the 3rd seed, which is likely to be Seattle. It can still be any of Green Bay, Seattle, or New Orleans, but it's likely to be the team who are currently at the 3rd seed, and that is Seattle. So in a strange way, or in a unique way, it is still a big game for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are averaging 29.9 points a game this season, which is a franchise record of points scored on average per game. For the Falcons, interim head coach Raheem Morris interviewed for the head coach gig during the week. So obviously they've got some big decisions to make this offseason, not just with the head coaching position, but the general managing position as well, and possibly even at quarterback. But this game is in Tampa Bay, and I think the Bucs will win and secure the first, the best of the 3 wild card spots, and they will finish the regular season 11-5 and travel on the road in the first week in the wild card round to play the winner of the NFC East, which this next game will have a lot to say about that. Dallas at the New York Giants, 6-9. The Cowboys at the Giants, who are 5-10. The winner of this one will clinch the division so long as Philadelphia beat Washington on Sunday night. So whoever wins this game will go to the top of the division for the time being, and then they will all go home and watch with bated breath to see what happens on Sunday Night Football. For the Giants, it's the first time since 2011 that they have entered Week 17 with a chance to win the division. Of course, that year, they did win the division. I think they had the 4th seed, and they went on to win the Super Bowl. They beat the Patriots that year. So that may be a little bit of an omen for the Giants, although I don't think so. This is a huge test tomorrow for Daniel Jones and Joe Judge and these New York Football Giants. It's the biggest game by a long way of quarterback Daniel Jones' young career. So let's see how he goes with the pressure. Daniel Jones tomorrow. For the Cowboys, Andy Dalton threw for 377 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Eagles last week. A performance that showed how explosive this offense can still be when they have at least a competent quarterback distributing the ball to all of its playmakers. The Cowboys have won 7 straight games against the Giants. I think they will make this 8. They will make it 8, I should say, wins against the Giants. And they will go to the top of the NFC East for the time being. The next game, the New York Jets at the New England Patriots. This game doesn't have any impact on the playoff seeding. The Jets, who were 2-13, all of a sudden, only 2 weeks ago, they were 0-13, and the Patriots are 6-9. I tell you what, are the Jets a better team than New England? Because they're sure playing like it at the moment. They are finishing this season in better form than New England, starting with Sam Darnold, who threw 2 touchdown passes in what could be maybe the final home game, could have been, I should say, the final home game of his star-crossed Jets career. We wait and see what they do with Sam Darnold in the off-season. We expect the Jets to part ways with head coach Adam Gase after this game tomorrow. It was reported earlier today that it looks like the Jets are going to move on from Adam Gase. That surprises approximately 0 people. I'm surprised they haven't moved on from him already, to be perfectly honest. Cam Newton again struggled last week against the Bills before being replaced by Jarrett Stidham in the third quarter. It looks like Bill Belichick, though, is going to roll with the off-season recruit Cam Newton. Tomorrow, it does look like the experiment might be one and done. Cam Newton, of course, only signed a one-year contract with the Patriots, and it looks like his journey with the Patriots might just be for one season. The Jets, they have not won on the road against New England since week 11, 2008. And I tell you what, I would not put it past them to go in there and win tomorrow. Like I said, they are playing like the better team, the Jets. And I'm going to pick them. I'm going to pick them because they look to me like the better team, and they're playing with more confidence. You can tell no one in that building wants anything to do with the 0-16 record, which they have well and truly bypassed now. So I think they're going to win tomorrow, the New York Jets, and finish 3-13. The next game, another game that has no impact on the playoffs, Minnesota at Detroit. Minnesota, 52 points allowed last week against the Saints. It's the most by a Vikings team since 1963, while the 583 total yards by the Saints represented the most yielded to any opponent in the history of the franchise. Mike Zimmer, after the game, said that was the worst loss he had ever had. Tomorrow, Delvin Cook will not play for the Vikings, a family bereavement. And like I alluded to before the break, will this be the final time that we see Matt Stafford in Honolulu blue in the Motor City? I wouldn't be surprised at all. If it is Minnesota, the Vikings have won 6 straight against Detroit. I think they may win so again and finish the season 7-9. Pittsburgh and Cleveland is next up. Pittsburgh, their win against Indy was huge last week. Like I said, it allows them to rest Ben Roethlisberger and some others as well. After missing out on their bye week really earlier in the season, they can treat this one against the Browns as a bye week because they don't really have too much to play for, and it's possible that the Steelers could play to win against the Browns and lose and still have the number 3 seed. So they can get the number 2 seed as well, but the number 2 seed doesn't mean as much now with no bye week. It really only means the possibility of perhaps playing 2 home games, and that's only if you win your first game in the wild card round. Mason Rudolph versus Myles Garrett. 2.0, that's going to be an interesting subplot to this one with Mason Rudolph starting in place of Ben Roethlisberger. Cleveland, all they needed to do was beat the Jets last week to end the longest postseason drought in the NFL. At the moment, they failed in doing that, and now they face the prospect of missing the playoffs entirely if things don't go their way in Week 17. Basically, the Browns, they clinched their first playoff berth since 2002 with a win. If they lose, which is still a real possibility, they need to hope that Indianapolis also lose, and they play Jacksonville, who are the worst team in the league at the moment by record anyway. But remember, Jacksonville did beat Indianapolis when they played in Week 1. So Cleveland have to win. If they don't, they need some help from the Colts. Baltimore and Cincinnati is the next one. This is in Cincinnati. Baltimore, the win over the Giants last week combined with losses by the Browns and the Colts put the Ravens in control of its playoff destiny entering the final Sunday of the regular season. Baltimore, during their 4-game winning streak, which they are on, which has revitalized their season, they've beaten their opponents by an average of 15 points. So they have been dominating the Ravens. They will clinch a playoff berth with a win, and they need to hope, if they lose, they need to hope that Indy or Cleveland lose. But I don't think they should have to worry about that. The Ravens, they should beat the Cincinnati Bengals, who have been playing okay as well. But the Ravens are absolutely rocking and rolling, and there will be teams that have already secured a spot in the playoffs that will be hoping the Ravens don't get in, because if they get in, look out. They are arguably entering the playoffs, should they win and beat the Bengals and get in, which I suspect they will, as one of the hottest teams in the league. So if they get in, look out. No team will have any business. They will have no interest in playing the Baltimore Ravens, who I think will beat the Bengals on the road tomorrow. And then the final game in the early window is Miami at Buffalo. And there's a little bit in this game. Miami, Brian Flores said that Tua will start. Tomorrow, of course, he was benched late in the win over the Raiders for Ryan Fitzpatrick. And Ryan Fitzpatrick, Tua has to start because Ryan Fitzpatrick actually tested positive to COVID during the week. So that was pretty big news for the Dolphins. So Tua will start, and he's going to have to finish this game because Fitzpatrick will not be there to come in and try and salvage the game if they're down. The Dolphins, they're the number 5 seed at the moment, but of all the teams in the AFC who are battling to get in, they have the toughest matchup on paper, playing the Bills in Buffalo. If they lose, the Dolphins, and Indianapolis win, then they are ready to pounce. The Colts, if they win, then they will jump in, and the Dolphins are out. Miami, they do win every single tiebreaker situation except for one, and that is where they and the Tennessee Titans are the only teams left at 10-6. So they're in a good position unless they lose, which I suspect they might, and Tennessee do as well. They could miss out as well, of course, because they're the only 10-6 team. So if the other 4 teams, that is Baltimore, Cleveland, Tennessee, and Indianapolis, if they all win and go to 11-5, and the Dolphins won't, they will be out. So the Dolphins, they need to win, and if they lose, they need to hope that Indianapolis or one of the other teams loses and not Tennessee, because that won't really mean too much for them. The Bills, they are 1 win or a Steelers loss away from clinching the number 2 spot. Like I said, the only real advantage is that you may get yourself a home game, 2 home games. They will have fans in attendance as well next week for their first home playoff game in 25 years, which is good news for them. They signed Kenny Stills as well during the week, as if they needed any more playmaking weapons. They are, the Bills, that is, 6-1 against Miami under Sean McDermott. I think they will beat Miami, and it'll be a nervous afternoon for the Dolphins watching all of the other scenarios and results play out, and the Buffalo Bills will finish 13-3 in what's been a great season and go into the playoffs as the number 2 seed in the AFC. They were the early window games. I'm going to break down the mid-afternoon games and Sunday night football as well when we return on Talkin' American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg. You're listening to KC Radio 97.7 FM. Back soon. Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Talkin' American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg, on this Sunday evening on KC Radio 97.7 FM, where we're going through and previewing the final week 17, that is, of NFL action tomorrow, where there are playoff implications galore. And before the break, we went through and had a look at all the early games that will begin at 5 a.m., where there will be a lot of playoff implications, particularly for the AFC, where there are 5 teams battling for the 4 spots. And in the NFC as well, there are 3 teams battling for 2 spots. Most of the NFC games are in this mid-afternoon window, which I'm going to go and have a look at now and preview. They are at 8:25 tomorrow morning. First game I'm going to look at here is the Seattle Seahawks, who are the NFC West champions for 2020. They go to San Francisco, which of course won't be in San Francisco. It will be in Arizona at, what's that called? Is that State Farm Stadium, I think, from memory? Anyway, Seattle go to San Francisco, to Arizona to play San Francisco, where Seattle needs to beat the 49ers, which is very possible. In fact, I think that might happen. Well, they need to hope that the Packers lose to Chicago, which may happen, and the Saints lose to the Panthers, which, to be honest, probably won't. And if all of those things fall into place, Seattle will be the number 1 seed in the NFC. So it'll be interesting to see tomorrow how Seattle play this. There's a small chance that they can have the number 1 seed. Do they play for that? Or do they maybe rest a few of their guys? There hasn't been any indication that they will do that. But they may be tempted to rest some of their guys and sort of almost use this week as a bye week rather than throw caution to the wind, trying to get the bye week next week, and then things that are out of their control happen. And that deems, Seattle then will have the 3rd seed most likely, or possibly the 2nd. Seattle, like I said, it looks like they're destined to finish with the 3rd seed. And what that will mean is we will potentially have the LA Rams or Arizona, who both play each other in the next game. They will play Seattle, travel to Seattle and play Seattle in what will be a divisional game in the wildcard round, which are always fun. The Seahawks defense, they've allowed 17 points or fewer in 5 straight games. And how about Jamal Adams? He has 9.5 sacks from his safety position. I know he plays up in the box a lot and plays as another linebacker. That's how Pete Carroll likes to likes to use him, but he's equal 8th in the league with 9.5 sacks. And consider he missed a few games as well through injury, Jamal Adams. So they gave up a first-round pick and another sort of mid-round pick as well, I think, a first and a third, I think, to get Jamal Adams from the Jets, and he's paid dividends immediately, Jamal Adams, as we suspected that he might. He's one of the great young secondary players in the league, Jamal Adams. So he's had a great first season with the Seahawks. San Francisco, this may be the last game for defensive coordinator Robert Saleh, who looked like he was probably going to get a head coaching gig last year and then didn't. I suspect that will change in the offseason. I think he will be named. He will get a head coaching gig, I should say, somewhere in the league within the next week or two, depending on everything that happens. Of course, in this game, I think Seattle will win. They will go to 12-4, and then it remains. We'll see what happens in some of the other games, and that will sort of dictate what happens with the Seahawks and what seed they finish with. This next game is the other game in the NFC West, the Arizona Cardinals, the 8-7 Arizona Cardinals at the LA Rams, who are 9-6. For the Rams, they will be the number 6 seed at worst with a win over the Cardinals on Sunday, possibly setting up another game against the Seahawks. They could still reach the playoffs as the number 7 seed if they lose and Chicago lose to Green Bay as well. But if the Rams lose and Chicago win, then the Rams, amazingly, they will miss the playoffs despite being 9-4 only 3 weeks ago. So this is a big game for them, the Rams, to take care of their business, who, of course, will be playing with backup John Wolford under centre, with Jared Goff set to miss this one. And no Cooper Kupp either, it looks like, who was put on the COVID list this week as well. So arguably, two of their most important offensive weapons for the Rams. For Arizona, this is a must-win game for them. If they lose, then they're cooked. They're done. But if they win and Chicago don't beat the Packers, then that could see Arizona jump from outside the playoff picture where they are at the moment. They're currently at the 8th seed, I suppose, if you like, into the 6th seed. And there they will likely play Seattle. So this is a really big game. There's only 3 spots available two spots available in the NFC, and these two of the 3 teams that are still alive playing one another to get in. The LA Rams, they are 7-0 against the Cardinals under Sean McVay. It's a difficult one to pick because the Rams will be without Jared Goff, who, to be honest, the last few weeks has not played very well. All round, I think the Rams are a better team than the Cardinals, and I think that they are going to win and put an end to the Arizona Cardinals season, which, to be honest, they would be on a massive losing streak right now if they didn't have that Hail Mary from Kyle Murray at the end of that Buffalo Bills game. So I think the Rams will win at home. They will finish the Rams 9-7. Remember, they finished 9-7 last year and didn't get into the playoffs. 9-7 will be good enough for them to get in this year, I think, in Arizona will be left watching the playoffs from their couch. The next game back in the AFC for a moment is the 1-14 Jacksonville Jaguars, who will have the number 1 pick in the draft in 3 months' time. They go to Indianapolis to play the Colts, who are 10-5. The Colts are currently the 8th seed, if you like, so they're the team on the outside looking in, although arguably in the AFC they have the easiest matchup of any of the 5 teams that are fighting for a playoff berth. The Colts, while they lose every tiebreaker, really, the best case scenario for them is that they beat the Jacksonville Jaguars, they go to 11-5, and somebody loses. Somebody of Miami, Baltimore, Cleveland, or Tennessee lose. So really all they have to do is win and just hope that someone loses, which I think is a pretty high possibility. They finish 10-6 if they lose, the Colts, and there is a worst case scenario where they win and all of the other teams win as well. Also, all 5 teams that are in the hunt for the playoffs win, and then they would miss the playoffs despite winning 11 games, which would be a pretty crap way to go out. They have looked for the most part this year like a playoff caliber team, the Colts, but if they beat Jacksonville and no other team slips up, that means that all 5 teams will finish 11-5 and will basically be back where we started, with Indianapolis being the first team out. They could, of course, still win and Tennessee lose, and then they'll win the division and they'll finish as the 4 seed, and they'll host the playoff game. So there's all sorts of different things that can happen with Indianapolis, who will not show live scores in the stadium on Sunday. So it's going to be some kind of torture for the fans that are in the stadium in this one. But that, I don't think that will actually really have too much say on. Well, that won't really matter too much, I should say, because most of the games that affect their game happen in the earlier window. So they're sort of going to know where they stand. The one game that will not, that will run simultaneously with this one, that they won't see the scores to, is Tennessee at Houston, which is the next one. The 10-5 Tennessee Titans at Houston, who are 4-11. Tennessee clinched the division with a win. And they could, the Titans, also lose to Houston and still get into the playoffs if any of the Colts, Baltimore, or Miami lose. So the Titans, they are essentially first in line, and they have tiebreaker advantages over just about everybody. Basically, Tennessee, the only way they miss out is if they lose to Houston, which they have no right losing to Houston, although these teams played back in October earlier this year, and Tennessee did win, but Houston pushed them to overtime. So as long as they win, the only way that they can miss is if they lose, and then Baltimore, Indianapolis, Cleveland, and Miami all win. So they would have to be pretty unlucky to not get in. The Titans. Derrick Henry, he needs 223 rushing yards, I should say, to become the 8th player in league history to rush for more than 2,000 yards. And if that happens, which I would not bet against it because the Texans at the moment have, I think, the second worst run defense. If that happens, Tennessee will become the first franchise to have 2 players to cross the 2,000-yard barrier. Of course, Chris Johnson did it earlier, or late last decade, in 2008, I think, or 9 was the season. 8, I think it was the season. He did that. Houston, on last Sunday, Deshaun Watson broke the Texans' single-season passing touchdown record previously held by Matt Schaub, which was 29 in 2009. They can play spoiler here, the Texans, if they play well enough, but I don't think they will. I think Tennessee will win this game. The next game doesn't really have any playoff implications. It's the Raiders at the Broncos. The Broncos drew Lock through 2 interceptions last week, extending his turnover streak to a league worst 11 straight games. Could that have been his last game at Mile High Stadium? I suspect that it may have been. The Raiders, they are 1 cover 0 Hail Mary miracle against the Jets away from entering Week 17 on a 6-game losing streak. The Broncos have won 5 straight against the Raiders, and I think that may continue. I think Denver might win this one, and that will be that. The LA Chargers is the next one at the Chiefs. The Chiefs, who have already wrapped up the number 1 seed for the second time in 3 seasons with Mahomes at quarterback. Mahomes and others will be rested, so we won't see those guys again until the divisional round. Kansas City, they haven't won by more than 1 score since week 8, and that comes after a lucky win last week against Atlanta. On Sunday, how about Travis Kelce? He broke the NFL single-season receiving yard record by a tight end, reaching 1,416 yards on the year to surpass George Kittle, who had that record with 1,377 from 2018. Kansas City have won 12 of the last 13 against the Chargers. I don't think they will have too many issues, even with Mahomes and a few other rested tomorrow. Green Bay at Chicago. This is a pretty important one. Green Bay, a win in Chicago will clinch home field advantage for them. If they lose, they risk losing its playoff bye. If Green Bay lose and Seattle wins, Seattle will take the number 1 seed. But interestingly, if Green Bay and New Orleans finish alone at 12-4, Green Bay will still have the tiebreaker. But if all 3 teams, that is the Packers, Saints, and Seahawks, all finish on 12-4, then New Orleans will have the tiebreaker by virtue of a better conference record. So the Packers, they just need to beat Chicago, and they will wrap up the number 1 seed. Could be on track for Aaron Rodgers as well to play his first NFC Championship game at Lambeau Field. He's played 4 in total, all of them away from home. They will have to do it without David Bakhtiari, who suffered a season-ending knee injury at practice. So that's a massive blow for the Packers. The Bears, who are currently the 7th seed, win and they're in. That's it. If they win, they're in. There is a realistic, though anticlimactic chance here that the Bears lose and so do the Cardinals, and then the Bears will get in. Despite the fact that they didn't beat the Packers. Chicago, it's been an unbelievable turnaround after being left for dead after they were on a 6-game losing streak earlier in the season. Green Bay, they're 5-0 all time against the Bears in Week 17. I think the Packers will make light work of the Bears in this one. New Orleans and Carolina is the next one. The Saints would clinch home field advantage in the event that they beat the Panthers. The Packers lose to the Bears, and the Seahawks beat the 49ers, which would, like I say, create that 3-way tie at 12-4. The Saints at worst will finish with the number 3 seed. They're currently the second. Big news though, Alvin Kamara tested positive to coronavirus during the week, and the Saints will be without their entire running back room tomorrow, so that's a bit of a worry. One more thing on Alvin Kamara, had a great season, a masterful season, piled up 21 touchdowns and nearly 1,700 scrimmage yards, as well as the engine of that Saints offense. And Teddy Bridgewater has experienced an up and down first season for the Panthers. I would expect them to move forward with a rookie next year. And then the final game tomorrow, Sunday Night Football, Washington at Philadelphia. Washington clinches the division with a win. If they lose, the winner between the Cowboys and the Giants earlier in the day will win the division. But what this means is the team that was once 2-7 or worse will make the playoffs for the first time ever. It looks like Alex Smith will return, so that's good news for Washington. Philly, their undermanned defense surrendered more than 500 yards and 4 touchdowns last week against the Cowboys. Washington aren't that explosive, so they should be safe for a week. The Eagles, who have a bunch of players out, including Aussie left tackle Jordan Mailata, Fletcher Cox, Derek Barnett, tight end Dallas Goedert, Deshaun Jackson, Miles Sanders, they're all out, so maybe that's not good news for the Cowboys and the Giants, who need them to win this game. I think Washington will win and wrap up just their 3rd division title of the 21st century. So that's how I see Week 17 playing out. Going to take our final break here, gang, and when we return, we'll wrap up some things that happened in college football over the weekend, and I will give my predictions as to how the first week of the playoffs will look when we return on Talking American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg. You're listening to Casey Radio 97.7 FM. Back in a bit. Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Talking American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg, on this Sunday evening here on Casey Radio 97.7 FM, where before the break we went through the Week 17 games of the NFL, the final week of the regular season, and I tried to break down all of the playoff scenarios in every game and the teams that I can see perhaps getting into the playoffs, which of course will start next week. Also next week we will have the college football national championship after we had the 2 semi-finals on Saturday morning. So we're just going to recap and have a bit of a look at what happened there. Number 1, Alabama in the first game. This was in the Rose Bowl at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. It was supposed to be at the Rose Bowl, of course, in Southern California, but COVID meant that rising COVID numbers in Southern California meant that this game had to be moved. So number 1, Alabama, they played Notre Dame, who got in as the number 4 team. And it was a comfortable win for the Crimson Tide in the end, 31-14 winners over the Fighting Irish. Mac Jones, the quarterback for Alabama, played quite well, 25 of 30, 297 yards and 4 touchdowns. Of course, he is nominated for the Heisman Trophy, which will be held on Wednesday morning our time, January 6th. So when we come back together again next Sunday night, the Heisman Trophy winner will be declared, and Mac Jones is in the thick of it. It's going to be a big week for him and the Alabama boys, of course, who have been nominated for the Heisman Trophy. Both Mac Jones, the quarterback, and Devontae Smith, who had a great game as well. They have the Heisman Trophy ceremony and the national championship game to get ready for a week later. Speaking of Devontae Smith, 7 receptions, 130 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So he just keeps on keeping on this season. He's had one of the all-time seasons for an Alabama wide receiver that they will remember for a long, long time, Alabama fans. Najee Harris played really well too. He's probably catapulted his name up to the top of the sort of running back prospects that are available for the draft. He had 15 carries, 125 yards, including that incredible leap over the Notre Dame defensive back, which I'm sure all you guys saw. The guy, the Irish guy, I forget who he was exactly. It was Jack Crawford, I can't remember, but he was a 6'2" defensive back, and he was standing almost completely upright. And Najee Harris just jumped over him, just as easy as you would like. It was one of the great leaps that I've seen in college football. Probably since Lamar Jackson. Remember when he leaped over that guy against Syracuse for Louisville and went into the end zone? That was an incredible play too. Then the second semi-final, it was Ohio State in a little bit of an upset. A lot of people didn't think that they deserved to be in after they only played 7 games, including Clemson coach Dabo Swinney. He was left to eat his words after Ohio State beat Clemson 49-28 in the Sugar Bowl at the Mercedes-Benz Superdome in New Orleans. Justin Fields was the story in this one. Simply incredible. 22 of 28, 385 yards and 6 touchdowns, including and 1 interception as well. And it was an incredible performance after he took that massive hit in the second quarter from Clemson linebacker James Skelski, who was subsequently ejected from that hit. It looked like he'd almost been snapped in half, Justin Fields, on that hit. It was a brutal hit, but he come back and showed his toughness and threw a touchdown. I think he missed 1 play and then come back and threw a touchdown, I think 2 plays later, to Chris Olave, the wide receiver. So tremendous performance from Justin Fields. The running back Trey Sermon had 31 rushing attempts, 193 yards and a touchdown, so he was terrific as well. Trevor Lawrence didn't have his best game, but statistically he was fine. 33 of 48, 400 yards, 2 touchdowns and an interception. Sad for Trevor Lawrence, his last pass for the Tigers was an interception, so it's not the best note to end on. That is if he, of course, declares for the draft, which everybody expects him to do. The win for Ohio State sets up the national championship game, Alabama number 1 versus number 3. Ohio State at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, Tuesday, January 12, Australian Eastern Daylight Time. So we will come together once before that game, and I'll be able to preview that game in a little bit more depth next week. But just quickly on this one, Alabama and Ohio State have met once before in the college football playoff back in the first edition in 2014 in the semi-final, with the Buckeyes winning 42-38 with the Zeke Elliott rushing for 230 yards and 2 touchdowns. Alabama is 2-2 in the prior college football playoff national championship games, having won in 2016 and 2018 and having lost in 2017 and 2019. So they win in even-numbered years and lose in odd-numbered years, while for Ohio State, they appeared in 1 prior college football national championship game in the playoff era, having won the inaugural edition in 2015, where they beat Oregon. Of course, the week before they beat Alabama and rolled over the top of the Oregon Ducks. The early favourites in this one, Alabama, are touchdown favourites in this one. So like I say, next Sunday night I will preview this game in a little bit more depth, but the early favourite is Alabama. They are a touchdown favourites, and the Heisman Trophy, of course. Virtual Heisman Trophy ceremony on Wednesday, January 6th. Just to remind people, Mac Jones of Alabama, Trevor Lawrence of Clemson, Devontae Smith also of Alabama, and Kyle Trask, the Florida quarterback, are the prospects who are the players, I should say, who are up for nomination. Okay, we're going to get to your questions now, gang, because we've got a couple of other things to tidy up afterwards. So just a reminder, you can send through questions to me at theboylives_26 on Twitter, or you can send through the questions directly to the Twitter or Facebook page, Talkin American Footy Twitter or Facebook page on socials, just like Joel has done. And he asks, should the Chicago Bears re-sign Mitch Trubisky after his decent finish to the season? Well, I would just sort of calm down with Mitch Trubisky. The games that he has played and played well in the recent weeks, he's played against Houston last week, who have the second worst defense statistically in the league, and he's played Detroit as well, who have a pretty ordinary defense as well. So when you play those defenses, they're going to make you look okay. If they re-sign Mitch Trubisky, I liken this to the mistake that Jacksonville made in 2017 when they re-signed Blake Bortles, who had looked for all money during the season like they were going to move on, Jacksonville, from Blake Bortles, and then they win the division. They get into the playoffs really just because they had a great defense that year. Blake Bortles doesn't really play all that well against Buffalo in the divisional round. In the wild card round, the first week. But, Jacksonville play well enough with their defense and whatnot to get through to the second round. They then put up in the divisional round 45 points from memory on Pittsburgh in a game where Blake Bortles played really well. And then they played in the AFC Championship game against New England, where Blake Bortles played really well too. And if it wasn't for, maybe the bounce of the ball the other way or the rub of the green here or there, maybe Jacksonville would have made it to their first ever Super Bowl. And they let those two performances, Jacksonville, against New England and against the Steelers, fool them into thinking that he was their guy moving forward. If the Bears do that, I think they're making a grave mistake, and I think they're making the same mistake that Jacksonville did. If the Bears, fool themselves into thinking Mitch Trubisky is their guy just because he's had a few games where he's played well towards the end of the season. He did this last year as well. He finished pretty well. Also, I think the Bears need to cut bait with Mitch Trubisky and find another way to move forward. So no, I don't think they will re-sign Mitch Trubisky after his decent finish to the season. They may keep Mitch Trubisky around, but not as the starter next year. And to be honest, if he's not going to be the starter, I don't see the point in keeping him around. The next question, that was from Joel. The next question from Jack. Should the Jets take a quarterback with pick 2 or build around Sam Darnold? I've heard some people talking about this, that Darnold, similar to what I was just saying about Trubisky, Darnold has played well to close the year. I am an unabashed fan of Sam Darnold, but I think the Jets need to move on, and I think they will move on with a new quarterback at pick 2, whoever that is. I don't think they can fool themselves into, Sam Darnold playing well these last few weeks. If they wanted to move on with Sam Darnold, then they should have drafted better and gave him more weapons and gave him a better offensive line. The new coach that will come in, and I suspect the new general manager that will come in, are not going to move forward with Sam Darnold. So I think they will take whatever draft picks they can by virtue of trading Sam Darnold. And then they'll take, possibly Justin Fields or Zach Wilson or whoever they think is the second best quarterback. Of course, they may finish with pick 2, but there's a chance that they won't. I think that if they beat the Patriots and Cincinnati lose, then I think Cincinnati can go above them or higher than them in terms of the draft pecking order. So they're not locked into that pick. But no, I think that they should definitely take a quarterback and build around the new quarterback with pick 2. And the final question from Mel: has Devontae Smith's season catapulted him to the number 1 wide receiver prospect in this year's draft class? Well, it's interesting. He's had an all-time year and he's had a fantastic career at Alabama. I still think Jamar Chase is the better wide receiver prospect. Of course, LSU's Jamar Chase, who opted out of this year and has already declared for the draft. Perhaps it could be a little bit of out of sight, out of mind with Devontae Smith going ahead of him. But I do think Jamar Chase, he's still a top 5 pick for me, even though he missed this year and people voluntarily missed this year and people may have sort of forgotten about him, but scouts and general managers wouldn't have forgotten about him. He's a gun wide receiver, Jamar Chase. So I still think he'll be a top 5 pick. And Devontae Smith, I think, will sort of be somewhere between 6 and 10, maybe just outside 10, but I think he's done everything he could, Devontae Smith, to be a top 10 pick as well. Okie dokie, these are my predictions for the wild card round next week. In the AFC, we know Kansas City are going to have the bye. I think Indianapolis will get in. I think they will win, and I think Miami will lose, and that means the Colts will get in, and they will play on the road at Buffalo in the first week. I think the other 2 games will be Cleveland at the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think Cleveland might win, actually, tomorrow, and that will set up another bout with the Steelers. And the other game there, I think, will be Baltimore at Tennessee, that is the 4 seed, having clinched the division. So they're the games I think we will see tomorrow, my predictions anyway. Indianapolis at Buffalo, Cleveland at the Steelers, and Baltimore at Tennessee. In the NFC, I think Green Bay will win and clinch the number 1 seed. Chicago, I think, will get in by virtue of the Arizona Cardinals losing. So Chicago will lose as well, but still get in and play on the road to New Orleans. The Rams, having beaten the Cardinals, will play Seattle. And the last game, I have Tampa Bay at Washington, who I think will beat the Eagles tomorrow, Washington, and wrap up the division. So that's my predictions with what we will see for the wildcard round next week, but we'll wait and see, and we'll wait with bated breath tomorrow. I think watching Red Zone tomorrow is going to be a absolute must watch. Just a reminder, I will have my final power rankings out next week as we head into the playoffs, and I'm going to have my second mock draft as well, which will concern all 18 teams that have missed the playoffs. And quickly, the games tomorrow, 5 a.m. It's the Steelers and the Browns on 7, mate. The same time on ESPN, it's the Giants and the Cowboys, and then at 7, mate, at 8:30, it's Arizona and the Rams, and over on ESPN, it's the Bears and the Packers, and then to round out the season on ESPN, the final game of the regular season will be Philadelphia and the Washington football team. Enjoy the action tomorrow, gang. I hope your team gets into the playoffs if they're on the bubble, and I'll see you back here next Sunday night to talk about everything that happened in what I'm sure will be a chaotic Week 17 tomorrow, and preview as well the divisional round of the playoffs when we're back next Sunday night from 10 p.m. for Talking American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg, on KC Radio 97.7 FM. I'll see you then, gang. Bye-bye.